Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about a $60 million one-quarter loss. Absolutely brutal. And so we're going to talk about this loss that Wizards of the Coast is currently taking, and basically the victory lap that the OSR community and the indie community, OSR tabletop role-playing game community, and the indie tabletop role-playing game community, I think they are very distinct. I don't think they're, I know there's a little bit of overlap on that Venn diagram, but I'm talking about them from distinctness, right? I'll give you an example. OSE, Old School Essentials, that's an OSR game, right? Like bog standard OSR game. Iron Sworn Star Forged, that's an indie tabletop role-playing game, right? And so so let's talk about this. Let's jump right in. So 2022 Q3, there's a $60 million loss year over year from last year for Wizards of the Coast. Okay, now what products is that the fault of? That is the fault of Magic the Gathering, and that is the fault of Dungeons and Dragons, right? That for Wizards of the Coast to have a $60 million loss year over year for Q3, that is very, very significant, right? It's a bloody nose to Wizards of the Coast. It really is. Like they did not put their forearms up to block this blow, and it came, right? And so here's the thing. What I want to talk about is this victory lap, this dancing in the flames, this rejoicing that is happening from the OSR community and the indie tabletop role-playing community, far more from the OSR community, in my humble opinion. But the indie tabletop role-playing community has got a little shame on them here too for this. And there are a lot of OSRs who are like, "Yay, WotC down!" And the reason why is I get why they're saying this. They don't have any real wins, right? Like if you're the OSR, what was your latest accomplishment? Nobody even knows, right? Like they might have done another edition of OSE. Like they, who knows? Like, what did you copied Dungeons and Dragons again? Yay! Like, and the reality is they get no coverage, they get no shine, they get no juice, they get no momentum. OSR really, they just don't have much to celebrate, right? So rather than celebrate their own achievements, they are really celebrating this loss on the part of Wizards of the Coast, right? So why am I taking the time to make this video? Honestly, I hate this. I don't like seeing Wizards of the Coast in pain. I don't like seeing Wizards of the Coast take a loss. And I definitely do not like seeing them get mocked by the OSR. So I want to set the record straight, okay? Yes, Wizards of the Coast is their head is hanged low this week. $60 million loss, right? Let's put it in perspective. Their loss that is being reported by the actual market, by Forbes, right? By actual, SEC type markets, right? Like financial markets are reporting Wizards of the Coast $60 million loss. You know why? Because the market cares when Dungeons and Dragons loses, right? The market, and the reason why is Dungeons and Dragons has a huge blockbuster coming up, right? This is not a joke, and I know, and the OSR laughs at this because they want it to fail, but the reality is, people are lining up to castigate Lord of the Rings: Rings of Power, right? House of the Dragon, what has it turned out to be? A fantastic show buried on a streamer that's about to get sold for parts, right? If you're not paying attention, it doesn't really matter if you like House of the Dragon more than Lord of the Rings. Like Discovery, yes, the people who own Home and Garden and the Food Network bought HBO Max, and your dragon show, which has the most yucky romance ever in it, like it's super gross, right? It's literally on the chopping block to get sold for parts a couple years from now, right? It's being openly discussed, right? So the reality is there's a massive desire for an actually good, not stupid prequel fantasy show, movie, all of it, right? And Dungeons & Dragons is perfectly positioned to jump into the gap and make billions. That's what we're talking about here. Billions, right? And the the OSR this week is laughing at Wizards of the Coast, is laughing at Dungeons & Dragons community, right? And saying, look at you losers losing $60 million. And the market is just raking you over the coals. Yes, OSR, we took a loss this week. But our losses are greater than all of your accomplishments combined. That's the headline here. A $60 million loss outweighs Wizards of the Coast's greatest competitors, right? Did a single tabletop role-playing game outside of Dungeons & Dragons make $60 million last year? Did a single one make $60 million in the last decade? No, I don't think so. It really didn't, right? And you want to put it in full perspective, right? Magic the Gathering, they're part of this loss, right? You know who their competitor is right now? Flesh and Blood. You think 60 million? You think Flesh and Blood (CCG) has made $60 million in its existence? I think it's 3 years old, right? Also, yes, there is Pokemon CCG, which is doing very good, okay? But is still a drop in the bucket and not even a minor footnote in CCGs, right? The reality, and the reality is that game really it's not even a functioning CCG. The vast majority of Pokemon cards are sold to kids who throw them in the trash and then lament throwing them in the trash years later, right? Like, this is not, so the reality is, yes, Wizards of the Coast took a $60 million loss. Their loss outweighs the entirety of all OSR combined last year. I don't even think the entire OSR community made $60 million last year total, right? So that's the issue. Is we took it in the teeth this week. I'm hanging my head low. I'm very sad about this news, but the reality is, no community should be taking a victory lap when our losses outweigh your entire gain, right? And I think that's what really, kind of just galls me about the OSR, is they dance in the flames of the only real banner carrier for the entire industry. It's on the OSR, it's on the indie tabletop role-playing games to create something new, to do something innovative, to really move the ball forward, and they never do, right? Fantasy Flight Games made narrative dice. What has been done in the indie space? They just turn a couple dial knobs on the overall TTRPG. We don't have any new types of, game master, player. My tabletop role-playing game has something called a witness, a new type of participant, Now, I failed to get that over into the market, but the idea's there, right? And that's the issue. Is I just feel like the OSR and the indie tabletop role-playing games are so lazy. And I am really vexed this week to see them just dancing in the flames as WotC has a terrible week, but the headline of this is our losses our losses outweigh their gain. And here's the other one. The market, they really laughed at us this week. They really laughed at Wizards of the Coast this week and were like, you guys are $60 million down. What did the market have to say about the OSR? I could tell you what they did. I could tell you. It's so wild. The market didn't care. The market doesn't even know the OSR exists. Right? The market doesn't care about the OSR. They don't have a $1 billion multimedia property, multimedia blockbuster franchise film series coming out. The market doesn't even notice OSR. All that's my humble opinion. I'm eager to hear yours. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.